Danny K continues to spark debate over his racism rant, as some call it, on white privilege, even getting into a war of words on the matter with Western Cape Premier Helen Zille. Danny got tongues wagging this week when he went on Twitter about white people and race, saying not enough white people call out racism when it rears its ugly head, and encouraging his white followers to stand firm and have courage. Danny K joins us now on Skype. Danny, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us about this. Let's first start with what your state of mind was when you sent the tweet.
You know, to be honest, I didn't think that what I was saying would be very controversial or newsworthy at all. As a person, I've always just thought this, and over the past 12 months, my partner in Shout for a Safer South Africa, Kabelo Mabalani, and myself have been doing a lot of research and work in the social cohesion space. And I think you can just look around and see the enormous amounts of racial rhetoric and racism that's being spewed. And I think it's everyone's responsibility to stand up against such. So I think it was just another day at the office, you know, and should be for every South African.
So you weren't doing it to promote Anti-Racism Week or the partnership that you've started out with Kabelo to talk about some of these issues?
No, in fact, I didn't even know it was Anti-Racism Week, but what a lovely, you know, coincidence when I found out. But, you know, to be honest, I don't think motive really, for me, is what we should be focusing on. So, you know, standing up and saying these things is not really, you know, one's motive really plays second fiddle to the importance of what we're trying to achieve here. And I think if you're a South African really invested in social cohesion and working together and creating some unity apart from division, things like speaking out against racism, hate speech, and eradicating anything that's standing in our way should not get tongues wagging at all.
It's interesting that you're saying that you don't think motive matters at all, because I'm going to take you to an article that was written by Griselda. Okay, I'll get to the Griselda Kekana, saying that she actually titled it Fake Rage Race. And she speaks about how when our stars or our leaders, celebrities on Twitter say something, that their followers immediately follow suit with spewing venom or rage against the people that they believe it's against. So it is about the importance of influence. So motive does really matter, doesn't it?
Listen, you know, this is nothing new to me, social activism. And it's a product of my upbringing. I was taught as a young South African to, you know, to work with the other. It's been a large part of my music career. I've always enjoyed, you know, working with the wonderful diversity that South Africa has. And, you know, my NGO Shout has been running 10 years. We're very invested in driving social cohesion and working in the CSR space. So, you know, my motive is well established for many years as a progressive thinker and as a South African is all about inclusion. So, yeah, I guess if this came out of left, you know, if I had done nothing in the space and this was the first thing anyone had heard from me, I could understand questioning my motive. But then again, I think people with influence that are saying the right things, why chastise them? You know, why not focus on, is the message right? Rather than, you know, the message is right, but let's discredit the person saying it because we don't agree with the message. And I think that's kind of what happens. Having said
that, what are your thoughts, your feelings about the retort by the Western Cape Premier Helen Zille?
Well, I was very flattered that Helen was paying attention to my tweets. And you know, I'm not here to Helen bash. I know we're 3 months away from elections. I'm not a political person, and I'm not playing any political party card here. But I was just surprised and I guess a little disappointed that when I said we should stand up against racism, when I said I want to own my own sense of privilege as a white male South African, the first thing that Helen did was chastise me on my spelling and grammar. And I thought that was a tremendously missed opportunity by her to rather agree and then say, by the way, Danny, your spelling sucks, which it does. And I would have taken it on the chin, and we would have gone on with things. And I don't think people took very kindly to that from what I saw. But hey, you know, like I say, I'm not here to Helen bash.
But I am intrigued, though. You say, as a progressive thinker, what are your thoughts? What does how do you interact with that research that you've done on white privilege? How do you characterize it?
Very, very simple. And I think the term leads to a lot of defensiveness. I'm still trying to decode and understand why. So, look, my situation is very simple. My father was a South African who benefited during apartheid in a sense that 80% of the country was not competing with him. And by virtue of that, I grew up in a privileged home. And I was the beneficiary of that unearned generational privilege. And I was always taught. And my father was poor. He came from nothing, but he was able to compete in a very unequal world. And I was always taught as a young guy that, you know, recognize the ground on which you stand. And for me, it really frames my perspective, it frames my empathy, and it frames my sense of responsibility. And when I look at the response, specifically by Black people, to this ownership of privilege, I just see how much gratitude there is that you're out there going, we come from a deeply divided time. 18% of this country benefited greatly from it, and the majority really were marginalized. And if you can stand up there and be saying, we're not asking. Yeah.
I want to look at simple everyday things, because when you have such a contentious conversation, it surely must be hard getting through to people who have sort of white privilege as something that is natural. It's so intrinsic to walk up in a line and think that it's okay to, you know, cut in because it's how it should be. So how would you break it down for somebody who doesn't see it as white privilege?
Look, you can have male privilege. You know, I'm very conscious of the fact that I'm a male, and the patriarchy debate, in a sense that, you know, men are at the apex in society in many respects. You know, the commercial world, the political world. You can say that there's a sense, there's a duty on men to be the leaders in the conversation, to create some equality, and to participate positively to evening the gender scales. And I think that's my job as a progressive.
That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's just waking up every day, and it's just it's being a little bit more tolerant, more understanding, and it frames, like I say, my outlook of the world, and really drives my contribution.
Danny K, thank you so much for joining us, musician Danny K, and of course we continue with the discussion.